Hmm.
Come on. It should be live. Come on. Welcome to Troll Lords Games. I am your host, Daniel Fisher, for tonight's painting. I'm the owner of Haunted Holler Painting, and we're here going to paint a miniature tonight. And we have a special guest on here in a few minutes, and I've got a whole new setup that y'all might get to see here in a minute. And I'm trying to get chat up on my tablet so I can monitor chat because I can't see my computer screen now. So let's see here. Let me pause the actual video on my tablet because I don't want that running as well. Come on, pause. It, for some odd reason, it doesn't want me to pause it. Okay, well, let me put this right here so I can monitor the chat room and while I paint. And okay, all right. I'm looking good. I think I look good. I think I look great. Oh, I look amazing. That's cool. Okay, so tonight, guys, we're going to go back and use some of those wonderful paints from our friends over at Imperial Hobby Paints. And because we're going to try out a few new techniques that I've been dying to try out with it. And we're also going to use a little bit of the Citadel technical contrast medium. So this is the medium that is in contrast paint. And then they add like a pigment to it, which allows you to do lots of cool things with it. So we're going to experiment a little bit with this tonight, and we're going to paint a old school Minotaur. So I'll zoom in here in a moment so you get a better picture of the Minotaur. But essentially, what I have done with him is he has been primered black, and then I hit him with ink and gave him a somewhat of a zenithal highlight, which means I hit him with some white ink from the top and a little bit on the side, so we have like a shadowing effect here. So again, I'm still working on muscles. I want my muscles to look amazing. So let me switch over here, just make sure we're good to go here. And let's see here, we got the Geek Preacher. So let me explain who we got tonight. So we have a very, very good friend of mine and brother. We have Mr. Derek White. He will be in the audio with us tonight. He is the man they call the Geek Preacher. He has, oh my gosh, he is so awesome. He does so much cool stuff. And one of the awesomest things he does is I use that word awesomeness. He is the official cleric for GaryCon, and so he goes to GaryCon, and I usually come in tow, and he's there to play games with people and spend time with people and listen to people and pray with people, and he does the Sunday service, and you know he opens the con up in prayer, and it's a great thing that he gets to do. And usually when we're there, it's usually like Ash Wednesday, so I usually get my little ashes going on and start Lent, so it's always really cool. So I know he's here with me. He was working on something. Say hi if you can, Derek.
Hi, if you can, Derek.
See, right there he is.
Hey, everybody. How are you doing?
So throughout the night, guys, what I'm going to be doing is, as I talk to Derek a little bit while we paint, hopefully Dale will get a chance to jump in here with us as well. Is I'm going to be sharing out Derek's Patreon, and there's a reason for this. Derek has been working on a documentary. Now, this isn't Derek's first documentary. Derek has been in two other documentaries, and let's see here. One documentary is called The Fantasy Makers. And Derek, can you give us a little bit of information about The Fantasy Makers?
Yeah, The Fantasy Makers is a documentary on on the life of George MacDonald, the life of J.R.R. Tolkien, and the life of C.S. Lewis. George MacDonald was a fantasy writer. He was also a minister. And then, of course, most people know that J.R.R. Tolkien was a devout Catholic, and C.S. Lewis was a devout Anglican Christian. And the idea behind the fantasy makers was to talk about faith in imagination. It was to show that people of faith are some of the greatest creators of some of these imaginative works that many of us have loved since early childhood. And so, what we've done is in creating that documentary, what Refuge 31 did is they wanted to show that Christians do have imagination and that these Christian creators made some of the great, powerful, imaginative works of the 19th and 20th centuries. Uh, Sadly, unfortunately, Christians have been known as being unimaginative in our modern context. And so the idea behind the fantasy makers and the other documentary, the science fiction makers, was to show this level of imagination that should be integral to a life of faith and a life of spirituality.
So what you're saying is, if it wasn't for these wonderful men, we actually wouldn't have a lot of the fantasy that we have now that we get to enjoy, but also that you know, the people of Christian faith influenced the medium so much during their time, and that we're not all that bad.
I would say the last part is the most true. Is it part of the idea is to show, hey, we're not all a bunch of unimaginative hard asses. Pardon my language. But I think we would have still had fantasy if they had not created these things. It would have just looked very different. I think some of our fantasy might have been darker. That is one of the things. While Tolkien's Lord of the Rings is pretty dark, it ends on a sign of hope. George MacDonald's works have hope within them, and anyone who's ever read the Chronicles of Narnia uh, sees hope within it as well. And I think that is what's important about a good imagination. It doesn't have to lead you down those darker paths. I don't mind dark themes, but I always like to see a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. And I think that's what's very, very important about what MacDonald, Tolkien, and Lewis did. Is they always had that level of light, that level of hope in their writings. Unfortunately, I think that level of hope, that level of lightness, that level of joy might have been lacking if we had not had those three great writers doing that. Because I mean, when the world gets dark and things get rough, we all need something to give us a little bit of light, a little bit of hope.
It's true. I remember growing up as a kid, like I could power read as a kid, and it was mainly because I used to read to avoid things that scared me. I was very afraid of storms growing up, and it's partly my mom's church's fault, but we won't get into that. But so the I would literally go through like a 200-page book in like 30 minutes, just to and it was always usually fantasy, whether it's something like man, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or things. I mean, and that's to me that's just in line with other fantasy as well. I remember the first time reading The Hobbit that way. I think I was probably about 11, maybe 12 when I read The Hobbit the first time. And I'm actually reading it right now to my youngest. I got him the illustrated copy of it for his birthday, and he comes to me every night. It's so funny because normally he's afraid of stuff, but he comes up and says, "Dad, can we read about dragons tonight?" I think he really likes Bilbo. So
Oh yeah, Bilbo's great. I mean, to be very honest, I like The Hobbit so much better than Lord of the Rings. Yeah,
it
Stephen Chenault and I have that disagreement all the time. He's a big Lord of the Rings fan. For a backwoods Arkansan, he is way too cultured sometimes. So and I tease him about that all the time.
oh yeah.
Simply simply because, I mean, he's got a great education, and of course he's traveled a lot of places around the world, and he really loves the Lord of the Rings. Where I'm a huge Hobbit fan. I also like a lot of the sword and sorcery fantasy that came out in the 50s and 60s. Elsprague de Camp, and someone who came along a little later, Fritz Leiber. I'm really big into the sword and sorcery genre, which has been my biggest joy. Though I did enjoy the Lord of the Rings. Really loved the movies, but out of all the books, I just love The Hobbit because it just goes by so quickly.
Yeah.
And Bilbo Baggins has that everyman aspect about him that you can really get behind. And the dwarves reminded me of people I grew up around. A bunch of rednecks coming in there, busting up your house, eating all your food. I loved it. I really did,
They were there for a good time, though.
yeah. I thought it was really good. And so, yeah, I like that. And of course, I did read my share of high fantasy as well, and my share of science fiction in the 80s. So, I read a lot of Frank Herbert, not just his Dune books, but other books he wrote. So, yeah, I had my share of it. The Elfstones of Shannara, which I would call, really good 1980s high fantasy. So I remember reading that as a young boy.
Now,
Lots of stuff out there. Lots of good stuff out there.
As far as me, I really evolved into more on the lines of science fiction because that's what I was really into Star Wars in high school and Star Trek and all that stuff. So I started reading a lot of science fiction, and I love like the 1950s and 60s. I'm a real big Robert Heinlein fan. Um, but you worked on a project as well dealing with science fiction, correct?
Yes. This just came out earlier this year, called The Science Fiction Makers. And the Science Fiction Makers was similar to the Fantasy Makers, but it focused on more science fiction than anything. And I'm typing here so I can give you a little more information about it. If you have IMDb, you could pull all of these up on IMDb. But the Science Fiction Makers, it actually came out in October of last year, was released in Canada. It has not, unlike the Fantasy Makers, which you can find on Amazon Prime Video. So you can watch it for free if you have Amazon Prime Video. You can watch the Fantasy Makers. But the Science Fiction Makers came out last October. And it was really interesting filming that because we had to film parts of it in the midst of the pandemic. So the folks at Refuge 31 hired a local film crew where I live to come and interview me for it. And we had to, follow all the proper procedures. And so they actually filmed this one at the church I'm currently pastoring. They filmed parts of it. And this project focused on the lives of three science fiction writers who were also people of faith: Victor Rousseau, C.S. Lewis, and Madeleine L'Engle. The least known of those, of course, is Victor Rousseau, who was an odd sort of fellow. So this one has a little bit more of a darker turn when it talks about some of the challenges that Victor Rousseau had. And I really loved being a part of it. I am a huge Madeleine L'Engle fan. Those not familiar with Madeleine L'Engle, she wrote the Wrinkle in Time books, where they've made some movies about it. I've not been as happy with the movies because the books, I loved those books so much, and I just felt like none of the movies and the things I've seen on A Wrinkle in Time have ever been fully faithful to the book. That doesn't mean the movies aren't good in their own right. I just like it when they're a little bit more true to the author's vision. But yeah, I loved A Wrinkle in Time. I think I first read it when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I loved it so much that my older sister and I got into an argument because I told her even at that young age I wanted to name my first daughter after the main character in the book, whose name is Meg. And me and my sister argued about it because she loved the name Meg or Megan as well. And so she of course was my older sister, so she had a child before I did, and she named her daughter Megan. And so yeah, that kind of left me out of getting that name, naming one of my children after some geeky science fiction I read as a kid. What was interesting for me was when I was a kid and I read it, I did not realize Madeleine L'Engle was a Christian author. I didn't know that because I didn't go to church growing up. We went to church very rarely when I was a kid. And so that wasn't a part of my family's religious life. And Madeleine L'Engle was an Episcopalian. And like many Southerners, when we did go to church, it was a Southern Baptist church. And so I was really surprised later on, after I came to faith and got involved in the life of the church, to find out Madeleine L'Engle, one of my favorite writers from childhood, was also a person of faith and has written some other great books that had nothing to do with science fiction. But yeah, it was a fun documentary. We got to talk about fantasy and science fact and science fiction. And I really enjoyed talking about that because science fantasy is, I compare that a lot of times. You have science fantasy, which is more like Star Wars,
Right.
and you have science fact, which is more like Star Trek. Now, while that's not a tremendous comparison, it breaks down after a little bit. A lot of us love, science fantasy, and we like that science fact, or that the stuff that seems more probable, more realistic.
Right.
When you see Star Wars, we all wish and hope for the Force. But when you watch Star Trek from the 1970s and you see them holding a communicator in their hands and talking to a starship out in space, we realize today that actually could happen. Whereas, no matter how hard I've tried, I still can't force choke those people that annoy me.
Well,
so there's that.
Yeah, and talking about, like, you were talking about naming your first kid Meg, like, one of my favorite books is Ender's Game.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And Orson Scott Card. Now he is a Mormon, and but
he's a person of faith.
Right. Yeah. He has written some of my favorite books. The Seventh Son, stuff like that. Now that's a more of a, I guess that wouldn't be high fantasy. That's more of a American fantasy. So, but
yeah, I would put that. Of course, it's definitely in the science fiction category. And definitely in there. It has some I would put that more in the science fiction realm than the science fantasy realm. Yeah.
And my son, though, I named him after Ender Wiggins.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so in the book, Ender Wiggins' first name is actually Andrew. And,
yeah,
and so my wife actually wouldn't let me name him Ender, but she let me name him Andrew. And,
that's cool.
Yeah, and that's what that was about. That's where he gets his name at, is from that. And he thinks it's cool. He's read the book. My book's signed. I keep it close to my heart because I love that. That's one of my favorite stories, and I can go back and read that one over and over and over again. I've probably read it at least about 20 times. So, but yeah, it's really cool. And talking about like science fiction, there's a lot of there's one, isn't there, like the what was his name? Last name's, is it Robert Miller? Guy who created Traveler?
That's Mark Miller.
Mark Miller. He's
Mark's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, he's a Christian as well, and I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. But that kind of goes into what you're currently working on a little bit. You want to talk about that documentary that you're currently working on?
Well, before I talk about that, why don't you talk about your painting some here? Because you're about to, what is that you're putting on there? I don't want to eat up all of it, but we
Well,
can
I
go
don't
into what I'm
care.
talking about in a
People
little bit.
listen to me talk about painting all the time. But so what I've done here is again I zenithal highlight the Minotaur, which means I shot it down with some white ink. But you notice that until I actually started doing anything to it, it looked fairly white. But then I started adding more white to it. So what I'm doing is going in the areas where I would think that there is a lot of light hitting. I'm highlighting those areas in a pure white, and I'm layering it in. It looks like it's going to stand out. Right now, what we're working on is muscles. So that's something I'm trying to learn how to paint better is muscles. Okay, so tonight, what we're going to do is we're highlighting all these edges that I'm thinking would be hitting a lot of light, and then we're going to come in here and we're going to try a technique of somewhat what we would call glazing, but Citadel calls it their contrast paint method, but it's actually a method. It's been around for a long time, and it's called glazing. So what we'll essentially be doing is taking colors that, like, for instance, this fatigue's color here, it's a kind of a greenish brown. It so the really cool thing about the Imperial Hobby paints is that their paint is a acrylic resin medium, but it's got a liquid pigment in it. So I don't have to shake these paints. I do out of habit. I even put ball bearings in them out of habit, but I don't have to shake these because they are because of the fact that they have that liquid pigment in them. They are it's suspended in the medium. So what I'm going to end up doing is I've played with these in the past, and I wouldn't say they're thin, but they can be applied thinly, and so which will allow me to glaze with them. That's essentially what glazing is making the paint more translucent and painting it on in layers. And so
Nice.
so instead of having to worry about blending highlights and things like that, we're actually building those highlights up in white before we actually put the colors on. And so it's a way to cheat at it. So it's just something I've been working on for a while. So yeah, there's the and also in chat we've got Tyler. He is actually the creator of these paints, and he has become a really good friend of mine as well. And we talk a lot about paints and things like that. He's actually working on a Kickstarter, which should be coming out soon, and I believe he's got 70 new colors coming out. So
Whoa, that's a pretty good palette there. That
yeah,
sounds amazing.
hopefully I'll be able to get me some of those and play around with them. What color I'm using right now is his Eerie Mist, which is essentially a white. His white. He's got those names where he's Eerie Mist and Deco Pink, which I believe between Deco Pink is probably one of my favorite colors of his, and he's got it's something else
Oh
that's
yeah.
cool about his paints that I don't. I bring it up a lot. Is like, say I wanted a metallic color, instead of having to reach like for a gold, he has this stuff called Sizicus. I can't really pronounce that metal base. But what I do is take any one of his colors and I mix it with this base here, and it becomes a metallic. So I could take his
Nice.
orange and mix it with this base right here and make a gold. I mean, it's silver in nature. That's more of a what we would call a sterling silver, almost a plate mail um, color. And so, like when you mix that in, we could darken it a little bit, make it like gunmetal and stuff like that. So, but yeah, he's a pretty cool guy. So we talk a lot about painting and stuff. So, but yeah, I've been meaning to paint this Minotaur for a while. So I've got a lot of old school models that somebody had given me, and instead of painting them the old school way, I want to try newer techniques on them and stuff. So, and hopefully, if I can get this down pat, I may be able to teach this at GaryCon next year
Cool.
if we're able to go.
I'm looking forward to GaryCon opening back up. All goes well. If all goes well, I should be going to Gamehole this fall. That's one of the places that we'll be trying to film some of the new documentary coming out. I think that's a good intro to the new documentary
Yeah.
that we're going to be working on. Is it's going to this documentary the previous documentaries that I was a part of, they just interviewed me. I was just one of the guests they interviewed. In this one, I'm going to be interviewing people. They've asked me to do some interviews for this documentary because it's going to be about part of the untold history of Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
What we want to do in this is we're going to talk to people who were involved in the early days of Dungeons and Dragons. Our first interview is already set up with that tremendous artist, Larry Elmore.
And I'm so
All of
jealous.
these people are really close friends of mine that we're going to be interviewing. And we're going to talk about the 1980s, and we're going to talk about the Satanic Panic. The thing is, what makes this documentary different than everything else on the Satanic Panic is we're going to talk about how it affected the people working for TSR at that time and their family. What a lot of people don't know is that many of the people who worked for TSR during that time were people of faith, and it really soured them on the church. It really soured them on that. And I want to talk about that because their hurt was real during that time. Many of them have moved past that hurt now because it's been, Lord, I don't even want to say how long because I grew up through that, but it's been 30 plus years. But their hurt was real and tangible. And so I want to get their viewpoints, their perspective on how that whole reaction of our culture and the church and how they felt and what they experienced during that time, because nobody's talked about that. I've seen lots of things out there about how people our age, Daniel, how we felt, what we went through playing D&D and how our parents reacted either positively or negatively, how our churches reacted. We've talked about that a lot. There's a lot of stuff out there like that, and there are still people who talk about how it caused them to leave their churches and things of that nature. But what we want to do is we want to talk about the people who were there on the front lines. And while some of those folks are gone now, we have firsthand accounts of other people who worked for TSR back in the early days of Dungeons and Dragons, and we can get responses from them, and they can give us insight into the lives of those who aren't with us anymore and how they responded to it. So that's one of the things. Some of the other interviews I've got planned are people like Ernie Gygax Jr., Luke Gygax. I want to talk to them. I want to talk to Steve Sullivan, who did a lot of work back during that time for TSR. I'm planning on talking to him. Of course, I already mentioned Larry Elmore. If it goes well, we may be able to even interview Mark Miller, who designed Traveler. So while he didn't work for TSR, I'd like to hear about the effects of that on even science fiction role playing games. So there's lots of people we want to talk to, and we're getting on that. That's one of the reasons I'm taking a year leave from pastoral ministry. So I'm going to be out of a job for a year while working on this documentary. We do have a little bit of funding to get the documentary out there because Refuge 31 does a lot of work. But that's one of the difficult parts for me is I have to find additional revenues of income over this next year. And that's not always easy
That's why I
because
just shared
one
out
of
your
the
Patreon again.
well, thank you for sharing that. I really do appreciate that. And so the idea is on my Patreon, what I'm going to be doing is giving some behind the scenes photos and commentary on what we're talking about. I'm not going to be giving away a whole lot of the secrets about the documentary, but I will be having just general conversations and fun talks with these folks because they're all friends of mine. I've
Right.
known many of them some of them in the game, some people in the gaming industry I've known now for almost 20 years. Like, Steven Chenault of Troll
Yeah.
Lord. I've known Steven since 22, what, Jesus, Mary and Joseph. I've known him since like 2001, 2002,
Yeah.
Jolly Blackburn of Kinzer Co. and Knights of the Dinner Table. I've known Jolly for 15 plus years. A number of other people I've known for over a decade or so. And I've become close friends with them just from hanging out and getting to know them.
Yeah, and I got to meet a lot of those people through you.
Well, yeah, and I love to introduce that. That is the great thing about a lot of these people who were there in the early days of the hobby. Most people, put them in some sort of demigod status, and they are just really, in reality, they are all some of the nicest people you will ever meet. And if they've got the time, they will just sit there and talk to you about whatever you want to talk about. They love their fans. They're still blown away at how people appreciate what they've done over the years. I've met a couple of jerks, but they were all younger.
Yeah.
Some of them were younger than me. So it's weird how that works, but these folks are all just wonderful, friendly people, and I love them to death. Yeah,
And I
they're
do have to
just great.
tell everybody, for some of y'all that may know me, like I'm what you would consider a non-denominational minister myself. But like Derek's the guy I go to when I have issues and doubts and things like that. So he's the guy I confide into. He's my accountability person. So and I love him to death for it. So, but yeah, I can't wait for this. I'm super excited. But I'm really, even though I've met these people, I've talked to these people, have had conversations with most of them. It's just that it's got me. Yeah, I'm a little bit jealous that you get to go back and sit down with them one on one to interview them and stuff. So,
Well, it's just come from getting to know people over the years,
yeah,
taking the time. I would use my vacation time to go to the gaming conventions. I would sell off some of my old collection just to pay to go to the gaming conventions a lot of times, because it's just been a labor of love. I mean, I love Dungeons and Dragons. I've loved tabletop role playing games since I was a little kid. And while I got out of it, like many people did, I got back into it in my mid 20s and haven't looked back. And so, I just really love it. And I came to love it even more when I got to know all of these people who were there in the early days, because they're so different. It's such a wide variety. And the fun part, I think, for me and for you, Daniel, is that I didn't realize how many Southerners like us were so creative.
right.
I mean, to see that, I remember having a conversation with Gary Gygax before he passed away, and Gary was telling me about how he had invited a group of gamers from Tennessee to come up and play with him, and he had this whole crew come up from Tennessee. He was probably in his 50s or 60s at the time, and they'd come up there and play games with him. That's just the type of guy Gary was. As he got older, he would just
Yeah.
invite gamers to come up there, and it just blew my mind that he had a group of Tennessee guys come up there.
I wish I was in that
and
group.
and I wish I'd have been in that group too. And then, as I've been going to Gary Con over the years, they have what they call the Kentucky contingent
Yeah.
that comes up from Kentucky. It's really surprising at how many, and it makes me happy to see all our fellow Southerners loving this rich imagination that we find in role playing games and the creativity that's there.
Yeah, it's and part of it. I mean, there's a lot. Like here, we've got a lot of history in the Appalachians and a lot of folklore and stuff like that. But it's
Oh yeah.
almost like you have to dig for it nowadays and find people that are interested in stuff like that. But it's coming out more in a lot of gaming stuff. Like I know that there's a um, module coming out for Savage Worlds that's actually based in the Appalachians, and it's kind of a Cthulhu esque top 1920s, dealing with haints and hollers and the coal miners and stuff like that. I mean, but it's getting harder and harder to find people like that in this area, especially in the church areas. And I've had to deal with that. It's just they're more concerned with politics and football and hunting and stuff like that. So, but I mean,
Are you familiar with Manly Wade Wellman?
no, I'm not.
Uh, Manly Wade Wellman wrote books. Uh, I'm trying to. Oh yeah, it was called Silver John.
Hmm.
Manly Wade Wellman wrote Silver John, and he was actually one of the writers that was recommended early on. Silver John is this fictional character that Wellman made up that did fantasy stories,
Hmm.
and it was really cool. The dude's like a veteran, I think, of the Korean War,
Hmm.
and he has no real education. He's like one of these self-taught Southerners. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah.
And but he has a lot of occult and folklore. It's really, really good, and he just wrote a lot of stories about him. And I think that Silver John, if I'm remembering right, was from the Appalachians.
Okay.
Uh, it's like they use all the old folk tales of America.
Right.
It's really great fun read. In fact, I as a Christmas sermon one year, I read one of his short stories,
Oh wow.
and I think I freaked out an entire congregation of people when I did that.
That,
That video is still out there somewhere because that one got posted online. That
how
was
long ago was
probably
that? I'll have to dig for that.
Manly Wade Wellman is his name.
I'm talking about your
Yeah.
sermon.
Oh, the sermon. You might find it on my YouTube,
Good.
Geek Preacher YouTube. Um, go listen for my voice. There's been a few imitators that have popped up over the last couple of years using the name Geek Preacher. I haven't copyrighted it because I don't see any need to, because you can go out there and find out I've been called the Geek Preacher for so long
Mm-hmm.
that there can only be one, and the quickening will come upon them
I
before
was
they
getting
know
ready
it.
to say,
So,
are you the Highlander?
no, I wish I was, man, but no. I don't know if I would want to be an immortal like that, lose all your friends and your loved ones. And the idea that I'm they messed up the Highlander myth by making them aliens from another planet, doing battle. I didn't like all that. I kind of like the mystery of the Highlanders
Yeah.
as this mystical thing. So I don't adhere to any of the sequels. So,
Yeah. Well,
it's kind of like
with me,
kind
it
of like
was
the
the
Matrix.
what ruined it for me was the TV show.
Yeah,
Like,
I didn't mind the TV show so much. It was when they tried to do the crossovers I had problems with. I just looked at the TV show at first as a reboot. Now, here's something interesting as a painter that you will like.
mm-hmm.
On the first Highlander episode, go back and watch the first Highlander episode from the TV show,
Okay.
and you will see them walking by a Games Workshop store.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh man, I'll have to go back and look at that. And
See, I am this font of geek trivia. You just way too much geek trivia in here. Geek trivia, Bible trivia. It's not too different. It's not too different.
now the
So
key with doing what I'm doing right now is I have to keep the paint moving. We want it to cover, not be too opaque, but we want it to cover some areas, but we also want it to fall into the places where shadow would be. I don't want to say recesses because it's going to naturally try to fall into the recesses anyway. but we're trying to get it to fall into more of the areas where shadows would go. So you have to kind of pull it into that area. Now, I will tell you something interesting about painting. I don't know if you ever played video games, The Last of Us.
I have not. I
Well,
haven't played that.
it's a PlayStation game. I know that on the when they redid it, and I guess the sequel that just came out, there's one point where they walk into like an old apartment, and they find a place where someone has been painting Warhammer models in the game.
Mm.
It's pretty funny. So it's
That is cool. That
yeah,
is really cool.
one of my
Now, I
favorite
have a
parts.
question about what you're doing there. Is he going to be green, or are you going to shade another color on
I'm
top
gonna
of him?
shade another color. I like playing around with Minotaur colors. So like right now, I've mixed the sand with one called a necrotic flesh, and then and so it gives this, it darkened it up a little bit and did give us that tint of green that we're looking at. I'm gonna turn my other light on now too. Actually, let me go ahead and turn.
Oh, you just gave me an idea for a monster to throw in a game.
And so I will still be putting a shade, not really a shade on him, probably more of a patina, which is what we call it when we take a oil wash and put all over it and then wipe off the excess and stuff. But I have to mix that together, so that'll probably be on our next show. Today I'm just trying to get the colors in there to see what we can do with it and stuff, and try
I
not
may
to.
have to do a Minotaur zombie in a game, or at least some sort of Minotaur undead.
Man, I gotta tell you what I did Saturday night at Chuck's game. So we're playing Castles of Crusades, and we had. I'm a cleric of the god Burl, and I'm a human, but my god is a dwarf god, a god of stone and stuff. And his hated enemy is trolls. Like he hates the god hates trolls. So and so therefore I hate trolls as well. So we've got Chuck has just been throwing trolls at us left and right. It's just been a little bit ridiculous. And so I got tired of it, and because I had to bring people back from the point of death, just from trolls, and I've never had to really do that before. And so on the last troll, and I think he knew I was done. I took a level 1 spell. Like, his troll just showed up, and he's like, and I rode high on my initiative. He's like, "What are you gonna do?" I said, "I'm gonna cast a spell." He said, "What are you gonna cast?" And I said, "I'm gonna cast a level 0 spell, create water." He's like, why are you doing that?" And everybody at the table thinks, it's like, "Dude, you have this awesome mace. It's enchanted. You can knock the crap out of this troll." And I said, "I enchant water, and I'm gonna create." It says it creates 2 gallons of water wherever I choose. And they're like, "Okay, yes, I want it in his lungs." And Chuck just looked at me. Then he looked at the rule. Then he spent about 15 minutes calculating how long it's going to take a troll to drown. And he said, "You got 5 rounds. He's got to get the water out of his lungs in 5 rounds, or he's going to die." And everybody just burst out laughing because they had never done that or ever thought about that before. And they're like, "You let him do that?" And he's like, "Well, yeah. The rule doesn't say he can't do it." And so like everybody was hee hawing, and then this other guy was a room master. He's like, "Well, if he's going to do that, then I'm going to lower this troll's core body temperature to the point where the water in his lungs starts to freeze and stuff like that." So I got these guys who have literally been gaming their entirety of their life. They're about 10 years older than me. Have never thought to do anything like this before. And I just opened up a whole new world to them. Now they're going to sit around and figure out what they can do with their spells that their spells weren't meant to do. It's just going to ruin Chuck's day.
Yeah, I would, yeah, and you tell me 5e is too powerful, dude. That's pretty powerful to drown a troll with water in the lungs there.
Well, I've also come up with a way to make money when I'm in town. It's just because holy water I think sells for 5 gold pieces a pint.
Really?
Yeah, and I can enchant like I can bless like I think it's like 2-3 gallons of holy water a day. So,
Well, when my bard has downtime, he goes on tour. My bard is both a hype man and sells his own T-shirts.
oh dang, sells his own T-shirts. Really? That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. It's like so like if I don't make it to a game, if I can't make it to a session, they just say I'm out on tour, and then I get to roll some performance checks to see how well I did, and I make money for it. So yeah,
Nice.
of course, my bard has just spent. They wanted to catch me up to help level me up,
Yeah.
and so I threw some ideas out at my DM, and time runs differently in the Feywild.
Yeah.
So my bard just spent 2 years trapped in the Feywild,
Nice.
and the party had to come rescue him. Only problem is, when the Queen of the Fae told us she was going to send us back home. That was really cool. Unfortunately, we all screwed that up, and we ended up bringing the Queen of the Fae back with us, and she has now possessed the regent of the city, and we got to figure out what to do about that.
Uh oh.
So, yeah, Queen Mav of the
Mav.
Dark Fae. Yeah. Which is really funny because one of my players, who is obviously not watching this Twitch stream, he doesn't realize, but in my game, his character is like the great granddaughter of Mav in my game.
Okay.
So,
Is,
so
is he
that's
play?
even funnier.
Is he playing a fairy?
Well, I have him Fey touched.
Okay. Face
I use Fey touched in my game. When people want to do interesting stuff with their characters, I change up the races that are in the D&D core books,
Yeah.
or even in the Castles and Crusades core books. I'll change up the races to go with my games. And so he's like, well, I want my character to have this and this and to kind of be like this. And I'll be like, okay, well, they're Fey touched. And which is my way of saying, good, I get to screw with your character now, because Fey touch can mean all kinds of stuff.
See, and that's the cool thing. Like, a lot of people get so upset about, like, and I'll talk a little bit about how people are, especially, and I like to say this, the grognards, like to get so upset over, and I'm a grognard, don't get me wrong. I love Castles and Crusades, which is essentially second or first or AD&D with just a few minor rule changes. But then you've got, um, I still play like D&D second edition and stuff like that, and it's just that they get so upset over these rules that are coming out from Wizards. But that's the thing. You're the DM. You play it however you want to play it. If you want a rule in your game, you can have that rule in your game. There's no reason to get all bent out of shape over something.
Well, see, that's like my players. It was like I told them there are no tieflings in my world,
Yeah.
and they were like, okay, no tieflings. So I used a picture of a tiefling to show them a race that popped up. And one of my players, who's a big 5e character, said, oh, we've got tieflings in the world now. And I said, no, it's not a tiefling. There are no tieflings in this world. In fact, you don't know what it is, but this other character over here does. And basically, the idea is this is what would be a god-touched race. I threw in like Greco-Roman mythology in the game. So there are races that came into existence because the deities came down and got freaky with some people, or things like that. And so this creature that looks like a tiefling in 5e, because it was the best picture I could find, I was like, it's not a tiefling. It may not even have any of the powers of a tiefling.
Are you using
I'm just using this image.
Are you using the Theros books?
No,
Theros? Okay.
no.
I haven't bought that book yet, so the last one I bought that I'm actually using is the Candlekeep Mysteries, which I kind of wished it would have like rules to play actual fairies in there a little bit better, because they had fairies on the cover and it got everybody all excited that, oh, we're gonna get to play fairies. So
dude, making up a fairy is not hard.
yeah,
That would not be hard.
Now I want to show something here.
Basically, take a halfling, make it smaller, and give it whatever you want.
Some wings. So if you look here on the model, now your image is going to be a little bit behind. So what this is right here is where the paint is actually kind of pulled away from this area, and that could be caused by different things, but more than likely I thinned the paint down just a little bit too much there, so I'm gonna have to go back in and start reapplying it and layering it in a little bit more.
Cool.
Hopefully it'll dry up some. So but yeah, these people just don't understand. But yeah, I love. I'm just happy to play games. I don't care what it is.
Well,
You know.
what gets me, I think, with the whole Grognard debates and everything, and everybody wanting to go rules is what written. We play raw. Rules is written.
Yeah.
Dude, I've been playing D&D on and off since 1983. When we were kids, we didn't understand all the freaking rules.
Right.
Because, let's be honest, those books weren't always edited the best in the world.
Oh yeah.
And so we didn't
Wait,
always
Gygax wrote those books. They were the best.
the thing is so we had to make up some rules sometimes. We misunderstood rules. I mean, I didn't use weapon speed factor in my game.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there was speed factors in 1E in original AD&D, but I mean, I didn't use that. I mean, as kids, we used what we knew how to use. We did what was best for the fun of it, but we didn't and so over the years, it's kind of like I compare it to Monopoly, which is one of my least favorite games.
Oh yeah.
I remember growing up when I was a kid and I played Monopoly with my family. Whenever you went to jail or had to pay a fine, you put the money under free parking. And if you landed on free parking, you got all that money, right?
Yeah.
That's what my family did. I did not realize that was a house rule until I was much older.
Yeah,
and
that was my family rule too.
Yeah, lots of people did that. And so what I find with some of these grognards is they're out there going, "Oh, we need to use these rules," and then they tell me the rules, and I go back. You realize that was a rule we all used back in the day, but it wasn't in the books.
Yeah,
you realize that, right? I mean, that's just the way it worked.
Yeah.
To be honest, one of the things I disliked about AD&D First Edition, which we call First Edition now, one of the things I disliked was playing a thief. And the reason being was a thief had to really level up before they were good at pickpocketing or anything on those percentile checks.
Oh yeah.
It was really hard to do anything worth a flip with a thief in AD&D until they were like 7th or 8th level. When you go look at those percentile charts, man, that was some rough stuff. And thieves couldn't use any really good armor or anything of that nature. So yeah, they made it tough on us all the way around.
Yeah. It's like I had one of our guys was complaining on Saturday because he plays a witch, and we're all trying to get to 6th level, and I have to get, I think it was like 35,000 experience or something like that for a cleric, but his witch has like 52,000 experience to hit 6th level.
And I have to say, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
It's just that we were sitting there kind of astonished, and Chuck's like, "Are you sure?" And we pulled the book up, and that he was getting his witch stats from, and all that other stuff, and it's in there. It was Haunted Highlands, and and more than likely we didn't dig too much further into it, but that witch is probably going to get some sort of incredible abilities at level 6 that they just Steven didn't want it too overpowered. So a lot of people,
that's one of the things I really like, and I was thinking about this earlier today. One of the things I really do like about 5th edition is the milestone leveling. And here's why I thought about that. I was thinking, in reality, some of the early pre-printed adventures or modules had a form of milestone leveling in that. Because I remember seeing early adventures. I'm pretty sure some that came out in the 80s, it would say this adventure for characters 5th to 7th level or whatever.
Right.
And it would say at the end of it, it would say by the end of this, your character should be X level.
Right.
Because, everything was based on treasure. But the problem was you had to find everything. So if you missed something, you didn't get that extra level.
Right.
Like if you missed the chest under the floorboards in the outhouse or something crazy like that, you didn't get to level up. You didn't get all that extra treasure because, treasure helped you level up, not just killing monsters, but gold was XP as well.
Right. You could sell, a lot of people don't realize that you could sell that for the XP. I mean,
right.
And get rid of it that way instead.
Yeah, just kind of like you could do in some early video games, which they got that from D&D. So one of the things I realized was those modules were in effect saying, by the time you finish this module, you should be at X milestone. But the idea was you had to find everything. Well, I don't think that's fair to the players because if you missed a roll or something on some treasure and you didn't find this treasure, but if you complete the objective of the adventure, which Call of Cthulhu kind of does that, if you could complete the chapter in Call of Cthulhu, see, the idea of milestone leveling or milestone advancement is not new to tabletop RPGs. Wizards of the Coast didn't invent that.
Right.
Chaosium was using something similar, and you could improve your abilities in Call of Cthulhu after you got to the end of a certain part of a story arc. And that was that base. So I think if you meet your objective in one way or another, after a certain period of time, you should level up.
And see,
I had to do. Go ahead.
Well, I use XP in my game, and with my daughter and stuff. But I do kind of blend it. Like I start giving them XP, and they're like, "Well, what's XP do?" Because all her friends have never really played before, and I guess some of them understand because they're video gamers and stuff. But like, I give them that to keep them interested. Oh, I've got how many XP to the next level? But by the time, in my mind, I mentally said, well, by the time we get done with this session, I'm going to level everybody up to level 2 as long as they live. And so, and it's the same way, like, kind of like, and I don't, that first level in Dungeon Crawl Classics, you get that first level when you get to the end of your funnel. And your funnel is that first module that you get ran through, or the first adventure that you get ran through. And so, like, you can get XP after that too, to level up. And that's just another thing that I blend. Even though I play 5th edition with the kids, I also blend aspects of other games. Like, they have the inspiration tokens in 5th edition, but I don't use inspiration tokens. I use something from Savage Worlds called bennies or benefits, where the kids can have a chance to earn the Benny tokens. I don't give them willy-nilly out to them, but they get a chance to earn these, and then when they do, like, you earn the inspiration, but they can, they could spend that in order to affect a roll, or re-roll if they wanted to re-roll something. So
yeah, I tend to at least make sure my players have something like inspiration once per session. Mm-hmm. I am thinking of changing it though, house ruling it, instead of it just allowing them to roll again or to roll advantage or disadvantage.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of telling them, hey, look, guys, you can use your inspiration if you want for a nat 20 or something like that.
Right. And well, there's nothing wrong with inspiration, I think inspiration's cool. It's for.
I think my daughter just heard me say that, and she plays in my D&D game. So yeah, I am seriously thinking about doing that. Is letting them use inspiration to roll a nat 20, and then I am also thinking along those lines of, and this I picked up from a TikToker, is what I'm thinking of letting them do is use group inspiration to advance the story.
Oh, that'd be
so like cool. If they all use their inspiration together, they can tell me, hey, this happened.
Yeah.
Of course, that could screw them over later because now they all have no inspiration left.
Right.
But yeah, so
That's
so there's
actually a
that.
pretty cool idea. I hadn't thought about that. And that's that's another thing. And a lot of people haven't realized that social media platforms like TikTok, um, man, that's got really big with Dungeons and Dragons stuff, like to get ideas and stuff. And I think Castles and Crusades is getting on there. I've been posting. I've posted a few things with Castles and Crusades, and Steven's gotten on there and posted some stuff as well. But like to get a lot of good
Well,
ideas about
I'll
gaming.
tell you the other thing that I'm doing, and then I'm going to have to let you go
Okay.
because it's about time to put my son to bed and settle down for the night because it's been a crazy day for us as a
Yeah,
family.
and you've got a busy day
But
tomorrow too, so
yeah, it's a busy week or so coming up. But one of the things that we can learn to do as DMs and as older gamers that I'm finding out. See, one of my players is also my daughter's dungeon master in another game. He was her dungeon master when she was in college. My
right.
daughter graduated college last December. And of course, because of the pandemic, she's still at home and will probably be at home for a couple of years now until the world settles back into some sort of normalcy. And so she's still playing in his game online, but she invited him to play in my game. And so what's really funny is she comes to me and she will tell me how this young DM, this 20 something Gen Z DM, is picking up on my DMing habits and utilizing them in his game.
Nice.
And that is the greatest feeling to know that, yes, my DMing skills are being passed down
Well, that's
to other
cool. I
generations.
hope that happens with my kids and or somebody that plays with me. I play with a lot of scouts because every time we go camping, I always run that one night, that Saturday night. Usually, I run a session for them, and it's fun trying to run a game for about 10 kids all at once. So,
You trying to be a miniature Steven Chenault, aren't you?
oh yeah, of
Well,
course.
thank you so much, Daniel, for inviting me to be on this wonderful uh, painting exposition here. Uh,
That's
I
what you
try and
call it,
tune
huh?
in. Hey, yeah. Well, I was just surprised. When did you start doing it on Tuesdays? Because I thought you had been doing it on
Well,
Thursdays.
we had a family thing come up that we needed our Thursday nights because it was Wednesdays, and then Chuck wanted me to move off that because another big RPG streamer streams on Wednesday nights, and it wasn't let me get a lot of views and stuff. And then actually last week was my first day on Tuesday, but because we had this family stuff that popped up, and you know. I was like, I just need to move it, and this actually seems like a better day so far. Usually towards the second half, we have a lot of people that just pop in because their streams in and they bombard the channel and they pop in and stuff. So it's pretty cool. So
Nice. Well,
yeah,
thank you again for having
no,
me on
no
here.
problem, man.
Uh,
I've been wanting to have you
Appreciate
on for a
the
while. So
Patreon promotions, and hopefully, once things settle down over the next few weeks, maybe we can get together and hang out. Or if you get some time off this summer, you know where I live,
well,
so come on over and
I
visit.
plan on trying to get down there soon. Because one, both my brothers are down there now, and I'm, want to see you more than I want to see my brother. So,
You sound like me. I'd like to see you more than I'd like to see my brother too. But
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's the way it goes.
All right.
Well,
Well,
take care, my friend.
I'll love you, bud.
Much love to you and much love to your viewers.
All right, thank
Take
you.
it easy.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
All right, guys. So we're still blocking this guy in a little bit. Now, I haven't been mixing this as well as I thought I would be. It's still turning out pretty good. I mean, we're gonna have to let some of this stuff dry. That's the only issue is drying times because of I don't have a lot of time to paint here, and I'm doing all this while a lot of it's still wet, and I'm moving around, and we're just seeing what we can do with this today. And tonight's about experimentation with these paints. I really do enjoy the paints from Imperial Hobby. but I'm trying to thin them down just to see what I could do a little bit with them. See if I can make something that they're not supposed to do, but make them do something that I want them to do. So, and I've tried mixing paints before like this to make a glazing medium, and I've not had a lot of luck. So it's not really the paint's fault. It's mostly my fault. So now what I'm going to do here is come in here and do the mouth, and these Minotaurs have some crazy looking teeth. And then we're going to make some metallics here in a minute. Okay. I could do better. But it's my fault mostly. Did I hit it? Nope, nope, good. Let's see here. I want to take a little bit of this red. A little of this flesh. And you know what time it is? Nipple time. It's my tablet saying, I'm almost dead. I'm almost dead. I hope y'all are having a great night tonight. I don't know how many people are on. Let me jump in here and see. Again, just let y'all know that Derek is an awesome dude. What he does is pretty cool. If you all get a chance to go to his Patreon, check it out. I'm not promoting my Patreon tonight because I'd rather promote Derek's Patreon tonight. My Patreon just buys supplies, but Derek's is going to help him live for the next year while he makes this documentary about the Satanic Panic, which I believe, as a gamer, the Satanic Panic affected all of us in different ways. I'm the best thing that, like, I started gaming probably in about 91, 92. When I first hit high school, is when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and there was a Satanic Panic right about that time. There's waves of the Satanic Panic, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys, younger viewers at least, have experienced the Satanic Panic at one point or another with the words escape me today. You experienced it with the Pokemon craze. You know, because we had issues where a lot of these churches were all upset over Pokemon. It was horrible, and it was the worst thing in the whole wide world for children to be playing a game like that, because it meant pocket monsters and all this other stuff, and they considered it demons and things of that nature, and it was pretty bad. Now, I did still paint that's not an Imperial Hobby paint. This is Contrast Sagor Brown, because I really needed a dark brown real quick, and this brown right there, so that's a fairly opaque brown, and I'm just putting it on his club. I'm not very good at mixing paints and mixing colors sometimes, so I just wanted to put this on his club as an oak brown. I'm not really good with browns, and I'll explain why. As I've got a red-green color blindness, and it affects me in different ways. It's hard for me to see certain browns. Like, I may have applied a green when I thought it was a brown, and vice versa. So that's why I love having, like, actual names on stuff. And I'm not saying it like it's. I don't ever call a paint company a bad name because of their name is not the actual name. I say bad things about paint companies when their paint sucks, and I do enjoy the Imperial Hobby paints. So let's see here, but I needed a dark brown, and I didn't want to mess that part up. So you can see some of the highlights are coming through on here, and so this isn't the finished effect. So what I have to do after all this is I do have to get my oils out and get a little bit of mineral spirits, which I did not get those out yet because we had such a busy day. I didn't want to do this on air. Um, as far as we'll probably wash it on air, but I didn't want to have to deal with the mineral spirits on air tonight because of all the craziness going on. It'd probably be better for me to do it next week. So now I'm looking for a good. Let's do this. We're gonna take this sanguine. This was a red, and again, I always, even though these things suspend very well, they've been sitting for a while, and I just want to give them that little extra shake because it's just an old habit of mine. So let's take a drop of this. We don't need a lot of red. Is that red? Here, one of my kids. Now I'm going to paint this directly on the tongue here. But then I'm going to let that dry a little bit. Okay. And we'll just let it soak in there. Uh-oh. It's my wife. Let me turn off the camera, guys. Sorry, I just had to turn off my face camera. Just for a second. Didn't know if she was coming in here to change. There we go. I just turned it back on, but she wasn't. So we'll paint the whole mouth red. I'm gonna go back in there and paint the whole mouth red. And what we'll do is we'll come back in here and retouch up the teeth. Okay. So I'm going to try to go back to basics on some of my stuff as well. So here's what we're going to do next. So actually I need to take this red anyway. It's watered down a little bit now. And I'm going to take and come in here and paint his loincloth. So, like so. I hear my youngest talking to my wife. Tyler, if you want, you could jump in, have a chit chat with us. I think you're still on my Discord. You can complain about how I'm painting tonight. It's all about that wash tonight. I might do another type of wash. Let's see here. Okay, now I'm gonna take, and I'm using I'm using synthetic brushes tonight because I knew I'd be doing a lot that was almost like washing. It's mainly because synthetics don't absorb water naturally like natural hairs do. So that's why I went with the synthetics, not as far as brushes go. Gotta get them toenails in there. Okay. Now, the mouth is still drying a little bit. But here's the fun part. Okay, so I'm going to take the metal base and a little bit of the flannin orange. I'm going to turn this around to a clean spot. Because now the thing is, when you do metallics, you want to make sure the metallics are opaque. You really want to make sure the metallics are opaque. So, well, you can't really see that too well. I'm going to put it up here. So I'm going to take a drop of this metal base right here. Okay. And I'm going to put a drop right here because it's going to be for something else. And the reason why this isn't coming out, and this is a mistake I made, is I put ball bearings in his paint bottles. when they didn't need ball bearings, and that means that the ball bearings slip into the holes a little bit and clog the paint bottles up, and that's completely my fault. So let's take some orange here, because we're going to mix up a gold. Okay, drop of that orange there. Should be enough. And we're going to mix this together like so. Okay, that's going to be a nice dark metallic orange color right there. Might be a bronze almost. Alright. So I hadn't got a chance to really get these out in a while. That's one of the reasons why I want to start painting with these more in the show and in real life. I'm going to use these mostly for fantasy stuff because I like painting fantasy stuff because I can paint it whatever I want to paint it. So I was going to do this like a leather strap around his arm, but I think I'm just going to do it as a gold color. Oh, there goes one of my dogs. It's our youngest dog. Her name's Luna. She is a Boston Terrier. I know I'm just talking right now because I don't have Dale in here. I don't know where my Dale is gone. Okay. Alright, let's let that dry there. Now, what I wanted to do here was, so I left some silver out here. So I could just come in here and do these spikes. Silver. A little bit. There we go. The spikes in there. Okay, now he's got his nose ring. I'm going to paint that. Got an earring right here. And the thing about these older models as well, they don't have a lot of detail on them. Okay, so I think this is probably the best I can do with this older model like this. Again, I'm still learning my muscles. We do got a few highlights on here, so we're gonna let this dry. And then what I'm really debating on whether or not just to wash it with a regular wash versus taking and using the other types of wash. What do y'all think? I think I need to fix his teeth because I didn't fix those. Okay, so let's come in here. And I will tell you guys, I have been screwing around as far as like, I haven't been practicing a lot lately. And so, like, my brush control is off a little bit tonight. Because, yes, you do have to practice. Tell your kids always, practice makes perfect, even in miniature painting. Okay. Alright. Let's let this dry. Alright. Huh. Tonight'll probably be a bit of a short one. And it's mainly because I am a little bit tired tonight. But, sorry, my big jar of lids here. But yeah, I've been working pretty much till midnight every night, last few nights, trying to get something done at work. So, it'll be my first night I get to kick out a little bit early, because I'm not going to work that late. So I'm going to take a little bit of this Army Painter Flesh Wash. I just decided I'll just do it this way. And I am going to thin it down just a little bit with some contrast medium, because the Army Painter washes have been known to be a little on the thick side. Okay. This is when everybody's like, no, Daniel, don't. You'll ruin it. You're going to ruin it by slathering a wash all over it. And I'm like, well, sorry, guys. That's what I do. As I ruin it. Always. With a wash. I will say the contrast medium is really good about mixing washes. I really do enjoy it. Be a little liberal here. The wash. And remember what I said about you want it to go where the shadows are, not necessarily the recesses. it's getting thick on me. Down there. Yeah, I'm getting quiet. Sorry, guys. Means I'm getting sleepy. Okay, so we're gonna let this. Start mopping up a little bit here. I'll move this around some so nothing pulls in one certain spot. Then where areas where it is pulling up, we'll move it. Just this flesh wash on his hair. We're going to come in with another wash here in a minute, though. Sorry, you can hear my 3D printer going. You can hear my computer fan revving up. How's that looking, guys? Now my next, I'm making a really dark brown. And it's going to be with this Cygor contrast brown. Just want to take a dot at it. Because this stuff a little bit goes a long way. And then rinse the brush out. Get a bunch of contrast medium. Okay. And then we're going to come in here. This. And we're going to go over his weapon. So. Okay. Then, see how opaque we are here. Come up over here on his horns. Put a little bit on the edge of his horns here. Get started. Sorry if you couldn't see that. Rinse my brush out and pull it this way. Oh. Okay. Alright. So it gives the horns a little bit more definition. So what is going to happen though is this is going to come out fairly a bit shiny. So I'll end up having to hit it with a little bit of my matte varnish, which is normal because that's what contrast medium kind of does, is make it shiny. You know, we don't want it shiny too much. So I'm going to turn it upside down a little bit and let some of these colors settle. Anybody want to give me any feedback so far? Say something like, "Oh, Daniel, that's horrible." And I have my favorite wash of all times. I'm not hinting to anybody to make this wash. It is a red leather wash. 2-to-1 mix flow aid and matte medium. 20 drops of burnt umber, 15 drops of scarlet, and 5 drops of black. Remember that color, people. This is my red leather wash. I love this wash. I just do. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Yay. Actually, I'll put the red leather wash here on his little thing as well. Alright, let's spin it around some more. Nothing gets too bad and settled. It's part of it, guys. Anybody got any questions for tonight? About how I'm doing such a wonderful job? Sorry, guys. This is how I am. You know me. Where is... Shade, Agrax, none oil. Alright. See here. And our last wash of the night is going to be our friend Mr. Nun Oil. Just need a drop of it. And that is going to go on just for a little breakup. We're going to put it right here. Okay. Right here and rub right there. Okay. I think that's it for tonight on this guy. Hopefully he'll dry okay. I've already seen spots where I need to come in here and use the magic of a wet brush to clean up some certain areas here. We're looking good. Alright, I'll try to get some pictures posted to him after he dries and I throw a matte medium on him, guys. But I think he's looking fairly good for tonight. I am going to kick it off a little bit here early. I got about 26 minutes left. Just want to go upstairs for a while and chillax and rest a bit. I hope you all have a great night, and thank you all for joining me tonight. And I was so excited to have Derek White on here with us tonight, and he's a great guy. He's one of my closest friends, and I love him to death. And if you feel that what he's doing with his documentaries on the Satanic Panic and things are in your wheelhouse and are willing to step out on the limb and help him out a little bit, go over to his Patreon. Click on that link. I'll post it one more time for you guys. And hit him up with some fundage. It will help him out a whole lot. I want to tell you, if you have Amazon Prime, go watch the Fantasy Makers. I know that the Science Fiction Makers is coming out soon on Amazon Prime. We don't have a date for it yet, and but also when this new Satanic Panic documentary comes out, it's going to be really awesome. It's going to shed some light on a few things, like example, Ravenloft was created by Tracy and Laura Hickman. Here's the thing: both of them are very devout Christians. I mean, it's just people don't ever think about this. They don't think about how what they deem is bad and going after that can hurt somebody else. So, and that's what we had to live with during this time period. But again, I love you guys. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I hope you all have a great and awesome night. And I will see you next week.